value, why should I buy a particular piece? And when I was exploring these questions, I realized that it goes far beyond that. Artists have a tremendous a litany of problems, I guess you could say, within the art industry. And one of the biggest is beyond counterfeits, which many people know that affects the $7 billion industry annually that is taken away from artists and their galleries that represent them. But beyond that, artists have absolutely no recourse or way of earning a royalty or a transfer interest. And this is one of the very few industries in the world that creatives are not paid a royalty. And so we've created a solution to allow artists to not only get paid a royalty perpetually, not only for their life, but continuing on through their legacy even after death, that their funds and family funds that represent them, like the Warhol and the foundations, will earn a percentage of the capital gains off of their artwork as it continues to move and sell, basically.
So what was the genesis of ATO? Why did you decide one morning you wake up and decide you had to do ATO?
Great question. My past life, I was a banker. I was at Morgan Stanley Private Wealth in Beverly Hills, one of the few women in the office. And but I loved it. You know, I'm a fighter, and I started networking just like I've never done in my life, to fight for leads, to try to bring in millions of dollars every week for the bank. And so I grew up in the art world. My grandparents were collectors of Japanese art, which just kind of leads to why we named it Eto, is the Japanese word for art. But I started going to the Gagosian Gallery and going to gallery openings because I thought that's where the people with money are, let's go find them. And you know, I always was very comfortable talking about art, and I started meeting artists, like world famous artists, like one of my favorite artists, David Hockney. I met him at the Gagosian in Beverly Hills, and talking to him and learning about how he is so nonchalant about how when his artwork resells for millions and millions of dollars at Sotheby's and auctions, he doesn't care. Absolutely none of that money will ever be seen by his grandchildren or his family or his endowments or his foundations or anything he stands for. And that moment kind of spurred my interest in, like, this is a problem that affects every single artist in the world, famous or not. And then the fact that they have to deal with counterfeits, the fact that their collectors have to deal with counterfeits and proving provenance later on. I just thought there must be a better way. And so I thought, you know, I'm an economist. I consider myself savvy in finance and in policy. And I thought, why don't we apply financial logic and financial policy and corporate structure to create a technology where we can track the data around the artist, track the physical artwork, as well as track their careers. So it kind of came out to, we started with a list of problems, and the solution was building something that was a mixture of a Bloomberg dashboard board meets the Kelly Blue Book for the art industry, where collectors and artists could know their true real-time value at any given point, in real time, based upon a number of people validating that value, not just one or two people in an auction house, not just one guy in a gallery in New York, so that we can know the real market demand, which would bring, anytime you bring that kind of transparency, you're going to grow the market. And so that new collectors and younger collectors and even people who want to collect but they don't know the real value can have a newfound confidence in the entire industry, really moving it.
So, you know, the new technologies that are coming out, they're about transparency and self-ownership of data and the ability to participate in transactions where the community and the creators can participate in the future earnings as opposed to aggregating it back to the system. The system in this case being the brokers, the museums, and the collectors who've artificially manipulated the market. Art is a security, whether you want to talk about it or not, but it's the only unregulated security market where you can basically put money in, manipulate the market, and go forward, and there's no legal ramification. So how does your system address that? And are you finding that people are welcoming the platform or that you're seeing resistance?
I see both. That's another great question. So I met with the, I don't normally say this on camera, but I met with the president of Christie's auction house 2 years ago, and he's like a family mutual friend. He took a meeting with me, and I explained what we really wanted to do, and he says, that would hurt us. The auction houses have been unapologetically against royalties. We all know about how several years ago, Sotheby's, Christie's, and eBay fought. There was a campaign of artists, thousands of artists, trying to get a federal law passed that they could get paid royalties. The auction houses teamed up against that. I told him that with our newfound transparency, if a collector owns a piece of art that's tracked by a microchip, that we can scan it with an iPhone or Android or literally thousands of different smart devices, and see in real time where all of the other pieces in that entire collection, where they are as far as value, if they're in a museum, if they're doing a show, to transparently see provenance and also know the real-time value, and not only that, get an email, a text message, and a voicemail when a piece from your collection resells for 100% value, you're notified of it. That you don't need to go out and hire someone from Christie's or Sotheby's to come send an intern for $400 to tell you if it's worth escalating to get it really valuated. A tremendous amount of their daily revenue is from valuations. So we would, for the contemporary market at least, close to take a big chunk at least out of that for them. So no, he was impressed with the technology. I thought he was going to be more open, considering that they, was 2 years ago, they hosted a blockchain tech innovation summit in London, which I wanted to speak on, but they didn't really invite me. They were talking about AI and different tools and how can we have blockchain. They actually had a blockchain auction with a David Hockney piece, which I reached out to him about, and he was like, it doesn't matter to me. You can put one or two things on the blockchain, but it doesn't really cement the value of the other works. It's almost like saying, hey, I'm going to show you, like with property values, I'm going to show you the value, appraised value for 2 houses out of 100 on this block. Doesn't really tell you the real value, And so we've created a foolproof system and platform that can prove to collectors the value add to the collectors is unbelievable, that they can actually know their value for the first time without paying somebody, without depending on one individual person. But instead you have a peer-to-peer system where thousands of people are qualifying and telling you that value.
And how does the system work? What's the point of contact where you trigger the involvement? Is it when someone tries to authenticate the art, or when they purchase it? When does your system kick in, and how does it work?
Good question. So the genesis of it is with the purchase of the art, whether you purchase it directly from the artist, from their gallery. We have a list of galleries we're working with now, mainly in Manhattan, and or from a private dealer. That piece of artwork is tracked through NFC, a near-field communication, just like you use on a ski lift card or on your iPhone for Apple Pay. You scan it, and it'll tell you the value of it, the actual purchase value. You know that what you're paying for is what the actual recorded value by the artist in the initial gallery is. So it starts there, but when other pieces are reselling in the secondary market, private auction, doesn't matter. Once that piece is purchased, there is a contract that initiates. That's universal in every single country, regardless of government, regardless of federal, regardless of anyone trying to enforce it. It is an agreement. It's similar to what many galleries use now, which is a UCC, a Uniform Code of Conduct, which says you can do this with art, you can't do this with the art, but they're not enforceable, and we all know that. With this particular piece, because we're putting it on our platform, and because we're saying that you agree to these terms, that you're going to report the value, if the reseller or the owner sells, if they fail to report the value, they fail to report the new provenance, they essentially lose the value of that work, and it no longer can be continued to be recorded and reevaluated and cemented on our platform. So it does not behoove you to try to secretly sell it or not report provenance or try to avoid taxes in some way, because you're really hurting that next buyer. Because when they go online, when they even Google that particular piece, or try to re-authenticate it themselves, or say, hey, we need to prove provenance, whatever, You can't. Basically, a lot like what Jackson Pollock's wife has done, is that I'm not authenticating anything else. If you have a Jackson Pollock right now and it's not authenticated, it's basically worthless. I mean, it's not worthless in that it's beautiful, but you will not be able to put it in a museum. You will not be able to get it into a catalog for an auction. You're really, it's just bad. So we've been able to take that same model and replicate it with technology and enforce it through our online contract.
Does this only work for living artists, or can you go to any art piece at this point?
Great question. Right now our focus is on living artists because they're alive and I care about them, and we want to change the future, and I can't change the past. I accept that. For deceased artists, it's complicated because, like for instance, Jackson Pollock, and very few people that can actually qualify Andy Warhol. There are thousands of counterfeits of Warhol. His signature was just swoop. It's not very difficult to counterfeit his. The thing is that we want to make sure that when we authenticate something, we can hear from the horse's mouth directly. And if we can't directly hear from that artist that this is true, we're not really focused on that at all.
So how many people in the room are collectors of art? Any collectors here? All right, and any questions? Do you guys have any questions? Yeah? If you do, feel free. We'd rather have an open forum with answering what do you got?
So on the near field code, how do you use that tamper resistant so that you're not able to?
Great question. Sounds like you already know about this. So we've been experimenting with a couple of different chips that we've ordered from China. Some of them are custom, some of them are just like off the shelf to play with. And we tested them and they work. They're extremely reliable, but the tamper-proof ones that we're using are made of like thousands of tiny threads, and if you try to remove it at all, they disintegrate. And not only that, there's a tiny antenna that it's not being physically tracked geographically. Nobody has to worry about security or safety. We're not tracking you. But when the antenna is destroyed, we have a dashboard that shows where all of the works are and the values and tracking on our end, kind of like a command station. When that antenna goes dead, we get a notice that it just drops off. So we contact the owner to say, hey, were you restoring it or changing the frame, to try to inquire in a peaceful way what happened, or was it just straight up stolen? So you're actually adding a layer of security. I'm glad you asked that.
And also,
Sure.
So right now the NFC tags have kind of moderate security guarantees. IBM are working on a set of technologies called crypto anchors, which are not quite ready for market. They'll be out in a year or 2 years. And the security guarantees on the IBM crypto anchors are much, much higher because it's a little powered device like a small computer, and it has a key pair on the computer with the private key essentially burned into the processor. And this will be an ongoing arms race, right? As new technologies come onto the market, you upgrade. So the NFCs are definitely a little weak now, but by the time you have any kind of scale, you'll be on crypto anchors or something else.
Exactly.
It's an ongoing process.
I'm familiar with those too. My first job out of college was at IBM, and I've stayed very close in touch with some of my friends in up in Massachusetts. They do a lot of the software stuff. But so exactly. I don't like to release other people's tech.
do you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a question regarding the fact that most collectors that I work with, they really like secrecy and anonymity when it comes to purchasing artworks.
Of course.
Obviously, when it comes to resale, you don't want to know what you actually paid for.
Wait, could you repeat that part?
Yeah, when you're trying to sell an artwork, you don't really want visibility in terms of what you paid for that artwork. I just don't know where the feedback that has come from some collectors on that front.
That's a great question. You have no fear of it. We're completely aware of not only for your own security of where your house is and where your art is and what your name is. Anonymity is guaranteed with our system. We've not only have we partnered with a team out of Cambridge/MIT. It's a security protocol that you have a public key is where the artwork is recorded to. It is, as far as I know, impossible to access the owner of that. So your public key is recording the price. So no one's going to know it unless you literally say this is my public key, and even if you did, you couldn't prove that. You couldn't prove that that was yours. So even if somebody, got into your phone somehow and saw your public key, or you wrote it on your notes for some reason, they would not be able to connect it directly to you as a person. Another thing that you kind of remind me of that we are very excited about with this security partnership is that when using tech where it's so secure that you have to know your password, you can't just easily reset it like a Google. Our software allows us, using biometric data, the way you hold your phone. It measures almost 200 different positions and behavioralism, so that even if you forget your password for some reason, you can still get in through another verification system. It has nothing to do with emailing back or forth or getting a little PIN number sent to your cell phone, which we all know can be hacked, can be manipulated. It's not secure as it should be. And so we have an additional layer of security that costs money, but we believe is worth it because we understand these types of collectors we're dealing with and their level of security that they need for themselves, not only to protect who they are, but their families and their assets.
I had a question. So, are you working, I can see the resistance from the auction houses, clearly. What's the relationship, and how's that emerging with the insurance companies, AIGA, the big ones that really have collectors they work with on a very close basis?
I love this question. I was just telling one of our initial investors this, reminding him actually, which he loves and said he's very proud of me for. So before I quit Morgan Stanley, I wanted to know, I'm very over the top on data and research. And so I reached out, I'm audacious too. So I wrote a business plan a couple of months, started forming my team, and started researching the viability of this as far as the insurance companies. I reached out to a client of mine actually, who has a large art insurance agent. He's a broker for AIG, AXA, Lloyd's of London, all the big ones. His whole family's been in the business for 38 years. And I told him about what we're doing, and he was like, let me connect you. So he connected me with the chief senior underwriter for AXA New York. His name's John. It's amazing. Started talking to him on the phone. He seemed very intrigued. He said, can you just send me the whole business plan? I'll just read it. I was like, it's 58 pages. He was like, send it over. Got back to John 2 weeks later, and he said, Carrie, what you are doing would make life so much easier for insurance companies. We would close out the circle of fraud for these pieces. We can immediately qualify if it's counterfeit or not, because, for instance, if one of my artists makes 18 pieces in 2018, a 19th piece pops up, it's not recorded on the platform, that's a red flag. Then we can check to see if it has an NFC. We can check, and there's not only an NFC, we use an 8-point verification system. We have multi-spectrum imaging, which is a type of camera that the guys in Switzerland use to check for counterfeits of like the most expensive pieces. We're using this type of high-end technology that really makes it impossible to counterfeit, but you have to secure that data when the work is created. So reverse pigment imaging, there's a number of things that we do. So John agreed with me that if you can record these pieces in this data at creation, at the birth, and even in their studio, which is what we do, we would basically make their jobs a lot easier, close out fraud, close out manipulation. A collector says, my house was broken into, or everything burned down, and I haven't had an appraisal in a few years, and so-and-so said it's this, and so-and-so said it's that. Our platform says, so-and-so times 3,000 says it's this. And here's all of the market data to support that based on dozens of variables. Yeah.
Is it Ramparts?
Sorry?
The firm, is it Ramparts? Do you know you guys at Ramparts?
Oh, no.
Okay.
It's Meskin
So you should.
firm in
Okay,
Dallas,
good.
in Los Angeles, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
You mentioned that your company allows also artists to retain ownership or participation in their artwork on future sales?
Yes, absolutely. So the legal term is not royalty. Our attorneys told us to always say transfer interest. That is the PC term. So when we say transfer interest, it's not, so for instance, if we were to, which we're hoping to, it's on the DL, but we're hoping to go into Gagosian Gallery and sell stickers on this because the gallery has a very small interest as well, but the majority, the lion's share, not over 90% of the royalty goes to the artist always. But once the piece resells, the contract states that the seller will pay a certain percentage, it's between 5 and 7% of the gross gain, yes, on the gain. And when you look at data, like so UBS report, art market report, which if anybody went to Basel, got their little UBS book, which is always, they always have amazing data, I love it, I just absorb it. But artwork ranging from 50 to 250,000 has a return of around 11%. But then when you get to the 250 to 500,000, 500,000 to 1 million, you're seeing an average of 23 to 28% return across the board, regardless of artist's race, gender, origin. Now, it doesn't matter. So when you look at those kinds of gains, asking for a few percent is not really a lot to ask. In addition to saying that for other pieces you have consistent validation that it's authentic, which is invaluable in my opinion. You have consistent ability to see the actual value and movement of the artwork. You have intel and data knowing that how the market is moving for this artist, that there's massive demand all of a sudden. If they're just, we're on the Oprah show, but you happen to miss it. If they have 3 requests from the LACMA in the last quarter, you're getting access to, like I said, the Bloomberg terminal. You're, as a collector, are getting unique access to things that not necessarily everyone is. For the first time. So we have an entire list of like I think 11 value adds for the collector. So we believe it's a small price to pay. Not every collector is going to want to do that. Not every collector is generous enough to want to give back to the artist, and they're kind of in it for themselves, as we know. But from my team of advisors, my investors who've already invested, who are in the art market for my investor and my 2 senior art advisors have 140 years of experience in the art industry already combined. And from what they say, that there is no real collector, when they say real collector, that actually cares about the artist and is holding that art and wants the value to go up for them, for the artist in themselves, but they're not going to dispute this. We've already done a survey of over 800 high net and ultra high net worth individuals that have absolutely no problem with paying a small royalty, knowing what it's going to do for the artist and the future generation of that artist's career, even after they die. To know that I bought a few pieces from this artist, I sold a few, and that particular piece I have's value is far greater than an artist that does not have that tracking and that does not have that value add.
Just one follow-up question.
Sure.
Is that transfer interest layered or not?
What do you mean by layered?
Well, let's in a couple of ways. So the first one would be, let's say it's sold through a gallery.
Mm-hmm.
Would the artist and the gallery retain the piece? Is the gallery smaller?
Yes. So the gallery is fractional. It's about 1/10 of 1%. But for the artist, yes, it is layered. So we're going to directly to certain artists. We're giving it away to a number of, like, a lot of artists.
But what about an owner that purchased it from the gallery? He resells it. Does he also?
Oh, no. It's specifically the gallery, because the gallery is the one is taking them to shows, putting in their money, putting in their name. It's specifically the gallery and the artist. We're not doing like a chain, which is a big problem. I've tried reselling Picassos, and you meet somebody that says, oh, I know a buyer, and then it's like 8 other people in line, like, know the buyer kind of thing. So frustrating. No, we're not doing that at all. We're not bringing that kind of culture into it.
There are other businesses that are looking to tokenize the art itself and to create a community amongst the ownership of individual art or the library of art of a collection or an artist. And they would be involved in the type of layering that you're talking about. But I think in Carrie's type of transaction, it's just the authentication of the asset itself and tracking of the provenance and the transactions. The seller is already getting paid. Right? He's selling, he's getting the lion's share of it. So it wouldn't make sense to be offering more for the authentic. What he's getting as the benefit is the fact that the art is selling for a higher price because you actually know what it is.
Yes.
When I was growing up, my best friend's parents owned the oldest fine arts dealership in the United States. And we used to walk into the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and he would just go, real, real, fake, 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 real, real, fake. And this is in the Rembrandt room, right? So and he, this is a real problem in the world. How do I know that I'm buying a Warhol? How do I know that I'm buying a Basquiat, right? And there's so many things. In my house, actually, I have a fake Diego Rivera in my house, which actually, we know it's a fake Diego Rivera, and we paid more for it because we knew it was a fake, because we know who did the fake. Right? So that's, I think that what you're talking about is there's different parts of the market. This new age of digitization of information and trading information and value in electronic formats is going to open up a lot of opportunities. I think Carrie's is just one, which is about the authentication and the redistribution of wealth back to the community that's actually producing the art, as opposed to just the capitalists who are, squeezing the system. And I think that this is one step. Any other questions?
So what is the potential for this technology from a regulatory standpoint to help reduce the use of art as a medium for money laundering?
Fantastic question. I'm glad you asked it. Everyone's amazing input here. I love this. So we've actually been in very close touch with some regulators. I have family that are actually in the government and and policymakers. So I was very interested to see what they said. In short, they love it. They love the fact that we can track what sales and what actual value is happening, that people can't get away or squeeze out of paying taxes no matter where they are on Earth. I'll give you an example. Canada actually is one of the first countries that if you are going to donate artwork to a museum and get a tax certificate write-off for a percentage of that they created a new division within their government, whole new, I think it's like the Arts Appraisal Regulatory Department. No one else, as far as I know, has it. It's incredible. And they say, if you say that this artwork is worth such and such, we have to have an unbiased third party within our industry, with our department, validate that. So case in point, several years ago, I think it was 2014, there was a family, very wealthy, ultra high net worth family in Canada that was donating a massive collection of Annie Leibovitz photography. Beautiful collection. They stated, I'd have to check online, I know it's in ArtNet, but it was about $45 million that they were claiming in value from over two or three independent art expert appraisers. One of them was Sotheby's. After the regulatory board got done with it, it was worth $13 million. And they had hundreds of sources. It took them almost a year to do. But that year was worth it because it saved nearly $30 million of what was going to be claimed in tax discount. That was money taken out of the pocket of the Canadian people. So when you create transparency and accountability of price and standard and create a new standard of visibility, you're taking away the ability for people to lie about value. There's all kinds of, I've been asked this before, I was on a panel during Art Basel about money laundering. There's many different ways to use art to money laundering. One of the most famous ones is having a friend that you're doing something nefarious with, saying, I have this piece for $100 million, is what the real value is. I want you to say you want to pay $20 million because you owe me 20 mil. So if you buy it from me for 120 and you give me 120, that's clean money now. And then I'm going to sell it later at an auction and make another 20 because I have validated source that someone was willing to pay 120 and we can at least try to list it on that. And if they don't want it, I already own it back. It was really 100, I've made my money back. So that's one of the most direct ways of money laundering. When the actual price, when I say, now we go back with our system, that piece is $100 million, I want my one friend to pay 120, but that raises a red flag for regulators and everyone in our industry and hundreds of thousands of people on the platform. They say, hey, wait, why does he want to pay $120 million for it? Because there's like data sets of thousands by the thousands that it's only 100. Why does he want to pay 120? It doesn't necessarily stop the transaction from occurring, but it slows it down and it brings up red flags so that we can at least be paying attention to this.
So we have to wrap up. So this is Carrie Eldridge, ATO Galleries. And I'm James Haft. My name of my company is Pal Capital Ventures, and we're the only publicly listed entity globally which is investing in distributed ledger solutions like Carrie's. So happy to talk to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.